Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington. And today I'm joined by a special friend of mine who, except for Dorothy, has probably been name dropped on the podcast the most as my wedding planner, Rebecca Grant of New Creations. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you guys do?
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Grant. I'm the founder and lead planner for New Creations Wedding Design and Coordination. While I live up in Snohomish, we service the greater Seattle and Eastern Washington area, as well as Hawaii, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well, Reed. But we have been in business now since 2011, and I am lucky enough to have a full-time associate planner with me who specializes in South Sound weddings. We've got a great established team, and we love what we do.
And I had one of my first summers, I had worked with Rebecca back at golf. I can't even remember the golf course at Edelin and Pepsi. We worked together, and I was very impressed. I was new and hadn't worked with a lot of planners, and so then when Dorothy and I got engaged, and I said, we need to do this, and she was not sold on it at all, which I think is telling. It's a tough with any kind of adding video or planning or whatever, and we set up the Skype call, and getting off that Skype call, she said, "All right, I'm sold." She goes, she has checklists on checklists on checklists.
Awesome.
And she said, "I'm so impressed." And it was good because I was really terrified about doing the wedding planning without that.
On your own?
Yeah. So talk about how's the year going for you? How's the summer? You just came from a venue walkthrough right now. How's it going?
I did. So we're almost done with our season. I have one more officially to go and one pending for New Year's Eve that just reached out. So we'll see about that. On average, I personally do a little bit more than the average wedding planner in the Seattle area. I actually book anywhere between 30 to 35 weddings a year, which is a little bit on the higher side. Most are doing anywhere between 10 to 15. And the reason why I do that is, one, it's not a hobby for me. It is a full-time job, so I do need to pay the bills. So being able to take on couples that I absolutely adore and ones that I click really well with is really important to me. And, just kind of on that vein, I've been in business long enough to know the couples that I'll get along with really, really well. And it's really important for me to have that really collaborative effort in the wedding planning process, because that's what it's all about. It's really drawing out the couple's personality and their style and being able to tell that in one day, being able to tell their story, to the guests that are there. So just about wrapping up, enjoying the fall season. For those of you that are not in the wedding industry, this is kind of the wedding planner spring clean, if you will, because now it's the time that we're starting to go through our house and purge stuff out and do all the decorating and all the stuff that most people do in the spring, but I don't have time. So my husband is watching our bank account dwindle as I'm starting to go through and get ready for fall and Christmas decorations.
So why wedding planning? What was that your calling? How did you find yourself in that? I know that's kind of a broad question.
Yeah, it's a long story too. So I did life a little bit backwards. So right out of high school, I actually got married at the age of 20. I bought my first house when I was 19, was able to go into operating 4 drive-thru coffee stands on the east side. And it was a pretty good life. We were making great money and, really had it all going for us. And then very quickly realized that 4 o'clock in the morning was not my calling anymore. And so decided that I wanted to start to pursue other avenues, and getting to know your customers over a 4 to 5 year span of serving them coffee every morning. You get to know them pretty well. And so one of my customers was a wedding planner, and she knew of my interest in floral design and interior design and running businesses and being a people person. And she's like, "Rebecca, I really think that you might need to look into this. I think this might be your job." And so did a little bit of research. Initially, I thought I was going to go the hotel route of going into catering sales manager position. And so I started looking for schools that offered programs within that. And so at the time, you have to remember this was back in 2003. So at the time in the US, it was Hawaii, New York, or Florida that offered programs in that. And so my husband at the time was able to move jobs directly over to Hawaii. And so up and we moved on New Year's Day with 9 suitcases. One of my customers asked us if we needed a place to stay, and we said yes. And so he offered his condo at $25 a week. So it was like everything just hit the mark and was totally meant to be. So how I got into the wedding planning, to answer your actual question, started, and I enrolled in travel industry management at UH Manoa, and went through travel industry management with the emphasis in wedding design and event coordination, and then also ended up finding a wedding planner on island who is actually still in business to this day, and she ended up hiring me as her day of assistant, and so I got my feet wet in that, and totally hit it off with her, and caught the bug. That was it. I was hooked. So yeah.
That's fascinating. I don't know if I knew all that. Backing up a minute here to this drive-thru coffee stand, I want to start at the beginning here before we get too far down the road. What was that like? How did that start out, or how did you find yourself in that?
Yeah. So at the time, my husband, he was a year ahead of me in school. And so he had already been working for this company. And so as I was graduating high school and really had zero idea what I wanted to do with my life, as most high schoolers don't, he's like, why don't you just come work for this coffee stand? And so I ended up doing that, and the owner was looking to hire a manager for one of our stands, and so he and I operated 2, and then there was 2 other managers for the other 2 coffee stands, and then she wanted out of it, and so we were given the opportunity to purchase the stands from her. So business owner at the age of 20 and operating 4 coffee stands in Juanita, Kirkland, Kenmore, and Totem Lake.
That's awesome. And so then did you guys sell those when you moved to Hawaii?
Yep. So up and sold the house, sold the coffee stands, and moved to Hawaii. So I know how scary it was for me, to leave my job when I, was starting the business. I mean, what was that? Was that stressful? What was that like? It was definitely a big step, but I also felt like I was young enough, because I was 23 at that point, where I felt like invincible, as you do in your early 20s, like, oh, I can make anything work, and if you want something bad enough and you have the drive to do it, you'll always find a way to make it work. So even if this career hadn't come out of that, it still would have been a pretty awesome experience to live in Hawaii. I mean, what 20-something wouldn't? So it just felt like so many things were falling into place that it possibly couldn't go wrong, So like the guy offering us a place to stay at $100 a month. I mean, that's unheard of. And being able to just sell the company and be able to afford to move over and just have everything totally lined up, meeting the wedding planner that still to this day is my mentor. I mean, just it was truly my calling and truly meant to be. And so it all worked out. And here I am. Gosh, 15 years later.
So what was it like living on Hawaii? I mean, that had to have been a dream.
It was. Yeah, it truly was. I adored it. Truly, prior to moving over, we heard kind of horror stories of, they hate white people and you're not going to do very well over there because of, the racist undertones, et cetera, et cetera. It's very weird to be a minority, I can tell you that. But I feel like where people get themselves into trouble is not really embracing the culture and wanting to change it versus wanting to really learn about it and understand the why behind it and understand the history that, realistically, the U.S. did take over Hawaii in a very traumatic way. And so I understand where they're coming from. And so just being really respectful of the culture and really wanting to learn about it and embrace it rather than trying to change it, because it is a very different environment. I wouldn't trade my experience for the world. The people that I met over there are some of the sweetest, most lifelong friends I will ever have. And not to mention the food was amazing. And also being able to go to the beach, of course. But it was very eye-opening. You talk about the prices of homes in Seattle. The prices of homes in Hawaii are even higher, and the food cost is higher. And I'll never forget my first Thanksgiving, going to the store and trying to purchase stuff for Thanksgiving, and the shelves were completely empty. And I was like, oh, when are you guys going to get another shipment? No, we have to wait for the barge to come, it's just very, very different living environment, but it was amazing. And I still get the privilege of working with couples here in the Seattle area that want to get married in Hawaii. And so I get to make it back typically between 1 to 2 times a year.
And that also kind of helped give you kind of round out your knowledge, right, of being a wedding planner, where you kind of you learn those specialties, right? Mm-hmm. And that you obviously feel like that relates then to Seattle too, and kind of different cultures coming here. I mean, yeah. Talk about just kind of being like that well-rounded wedding planner where you have expertise in, multiple fields.
Yeah. So when I moved back from Hawaii in June of 2008, when I started networking and getting to know other planners here, because I knew I wanted to launch my business here, I very quickly realized that no other planner had experience as much as I did in Asian wedding customs and culture. Just given the geographic region of Hawaii, and also the planner that I was working with on island was Burmese and Chinese, we got a ton of Asian weddings. So Japanese, Chinese, Hawaiian, Samoan, Filipino, Korean, Thai. I am well versed in all of those. And so when I moved back here and realized that nobody else had that background, I started marketing myself as an Asian wedding planner. And it's done very, very well for me. It's about 70 to 80% of my business is either full Asian or mixed Asian culture. And I cannot tell you the relief on my couples' faces when they realize they don't have to educate me. Like, it's something I just already know. And okay, do you want to incorporate XYZ as part of your wedding, or are you going to leave that part out? And it's just such a relief for them not to have to think about it. And it's such a cool thing as a fully Caucasian person to be a part of, because it's just all this color and all this joy and different cultures and traditions that are brought into the day. Like last weekend alone, I did a Japanese wedding where we brought in taiko drummers. And then the next day was a Chinese wedding where we did a full tea ceremony and a barter for the bride and all that type of stuff. So it's done very well for me. And then in addition to that, of course, do any other wedding. Like I said, I am full Caucasian. So, do any other wedding that comes our way. We're more than happy to work with different customs and cultures and family traditions that want to be brought in. And I think it makes the day really special too.
So when you got back to Seattle and you started your company and you decided this is what we're going to do, were you worried then that now that you're kind of like putting it in stone and putting up like your name and sign and everything? I mean, what was that like kind of starting and forming that?
Yeah. So when I when I moved over to Hawaii, actually, I also, in addition to going to school, was working as a store manager for Starbucks. So after we sold the coffee stands, I needed to find a job to be able to help pay for school. And so Starbucks was just brand new opening on island in Hawaii, and they helped pay for school, which is amazing. So I actually came out of school completely debt-free, which was such a blessing. But when I moved back, Starbucks transferred me directly across from Hawaii to Seattle. And so I was able to, just pick right back up where I left off in terms of that. So having that steady paycheck was such a relief. I mean, just having that kind of in your back pocket as you're starting your business. I do recommend having a game plan if you are thinking about starting your own business. It's very important. So I went through pretty slowly. So I built my business over 2 years of continuing to work as a store manager for Starbucks. As I gained more business within, under new creations, I slowly demoted myself through Starbucks. And then in September of 2011, I was able to turn in my notice and fully walk away. But I will never forget going from, on a morning shift at Starbucks, you can see easily upwards of 600 people, going from 600 people to sitting at my desk with my dog going, now what? Do I wait for the phone to ring? What am I supposed to do? It's a big, oh crap moment. But you just take it one day at a time. And I cannot tell you the importance of networking, and the people in this community are amazing and they rally around you, and just getting out there and getting yourself known is really important. And that's 100% on how I've built my business here in Seattle is completely word of mouth. We have been incredibly lucky to not have to advertise. And, like I said, I've been full-time here for 7 years and not one day of advertising. So just being a part of this community and networking and getting out there and sharing with people what I do, especially with my Asian wedding specialty, has been a godsend. So yeah, very, very lucky.
Yeah, it's tough. I think we were talking even off mic about how, starting the business and like I know like the 9 months that I kind of spent transferring was like the longest, because you have this idea and you want to start and you think, whatever. And then it's a long time kind of waiting and building. And when you finally, make that kind of pull that trigger, it is like, I remember, I remember who I was telling, Rosie and I used to go on like 3-hour walks every day
Yep.
back when I started, because it's like,
what do you do?
Kind of filling the time. And then now, it's, she still gets good walks, but it's more of trying to find time. Talk about kind of those first weddings, back in Seattle now, we have new creations. What was that like? Did you feel, you had been working obviously in Hawaii, but now kind of having it on your shoulders? What was that like?
Yeah, a big transition for sure. I felt really secure in knowing how to run a wedding just with the mentorship and the planning company that I worked with in Hawaii. But having that responsibility of you actually being in charge is a completely different thing. Also, I really, being 100% honest, really wasn't making a lot of money at that time either, because I had just quit Starbucks and I was launching this brand new business. And so I asked my husband to come be my day of assistant. Big mistake. So he and I, probably not the best combination on a wedding day. So he actually was my day of assistant for 2 years. And then he finally looked at me and he's like, Rebecca, you are finally starting to make money. Hire someone. So it was a big learning curve, especially over those first 2 years of running a small business. And statistically, that's the time frame where most small businesses go under is within that 2-year span. So just kind of getting that feeling of, okay, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to drive my business forward? It's a lot of pressure and just kind of knowing where to start. So again, we are incredibly blessed in the Seattle area to really have that mindset of community over competition. I cannot thank the wedding planners here in this area enough for really welcoming me and really, basically becoming the second mentor group to me here. And also, not just wedding planners, but fellow vendors as well. Just kind of, having those conversations and saying, yeah, let's do this and let's make it happen. And so, First couple of years were a little bit bumpy in terms of not feeling super secure in myself. Like I said, now I'm far enough in to know the clients that I will be the right fit for. At that time, I don't think I had that security in myself. So there was a few bumpy, weddings along the way, just people that I think would have probably been a better fit for somebody else. And couples need to know that in reality, like if we feel like we're not a good fit and if we say something to speak up, it's truly for your benefit. It's really important on a wedding day to make sure you've got the team around you that is going to be absolutely the best fit.
Yeah, I think that is, a common mistake vendors of any kind make, where you want to take any work and when you're starting and then, you look back and you're like, that probably wasn't it. We probably weren't the best fit. So I've talked with other people on the podcast about, kind of the Seattle wedding community. It's a pretty rich, thriving, like you said, very, people are helpful in the community. What was that like kind of entering into that, versus like having worked in Hawaii, a lot of like maybe tourism and a lot of, people coming in and out, I don't know, to get married. What was it like here when it?
Yeah. Well, here it was, where do I start? I think was the biggest thing. So I started just reaching out to wedding organizations. So I happened to fall into getting to know the folks that were running Wedding Network USA pretty well. And of course, they learned about my Asian wedding specialty. And so they actually asked me to come speak on Chinese, Japanese, and Filipino wedding customs. And from that meeting alone, I got 5 bookings from people that I had never worked with. But they're like, oh my gosh, she knows Asian weddings. We have couples to refer to her. So that was a total stroke of luck in just being at the right place at the right time and being asked to be that speaker. And that really gave me confidence and kind of catapulted my business here. Yeah.
That's good. I wanted to talk to you about, so, when you were starting back up here, what was your husband's thoughts when you said like, hey, now we're doing this? And like you said, he had helped you for the first 2 years. And was he like ever nervous for you? Or did he just kind of, was he like the strong silent, you're going to be good?
Yeah, he probably was nervous, but he didn't tell me, which is probably a good thing. He was very, very supportive. He had known that I had done that in Hawaii, but now, of course, it was on my shoulders. And I think having that game plan of having the transition out of Starbucks and into my business really helped with just still that financial stability. We also were lucky enough to start my business completely debt-free. I'm a big proponent on living a debt-free life. And so we actually currently are, except for our home. But at that stage of starting the business, there was no fear of, oh my gosh, we have to make a car payment. Oh my gosh, we have to, pay off all these credit cards. That was not our reality. We were able to start the business completely debt-free. And luckily, wedding planning, as one of the industries within the wedding field, really little overhead. You can do it out of your office. All you truly need is a website and business cards. But I think that was a big blessing in our lives to just not have that hanging over our head of like, oh my gosh, we have all this debt. And now Rebecca wants to have this pipe dream of starting her own business. We were able to do it methodically with, still having that steady paycheck and then working my way out of Starbucks and then building my business here in Seattle.
So one thing I'm always curious about is, how does one's own wedding day kind of correlate and help kind of shape them? I feel like I'm a better wedding vendor having kind of been through that process. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like having gone through, and been, be married that mm-hmm. like kind of helps inform how you work with your couples and kind of how you approach the day? Yeah,
most definitely. You understand what they're going through. It's very much of we realize that this is your first time doing this, and making sure that we're not getting annoyed with answering the same question thousands of times, because it does happen. There are ways that I've tried to curb a little bit of that in terms of, I partnered with another wedding planner that her and I were noticing we were starting to get a lot of the same questions. And so it's actually part of my booking process now is once couples have booked with me, we give you a welcome resource guide. And it has everything in there from how much alcohol to buy, what size dance floor, let's talk about rentals, how to change your name. It has all those little questions that we're getting asked over and over. It has all that in there. So hopefully that'll help alleviate a few of the, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. But even if you forget that it's in the welcome resource guide, I still answer it. I just direct you back to the welcome resource guide. But yeah, it's really important to make sure that we're understanding and, to me, the vendors, especially your videographer, photographer, and planner, are the three vendors that are with you from start to finish on your wedding day. So it is imperative that you get along really well with those people, because those people are going to see you all the way from getting dressed to the sparkler send-off, So it's really important that couples get along well with their vendors just as much as we get along well with them, and understanding that we've got you and we're going to have your back. And even though we have done hundreds of weddings, it's still the only time for you, and just making sure that we're really honing in on that and making sure it's a really great experience.
So I want to give you a platform now to kind of talk about, your belief in wedding planning, mm-hmm. Kind of if you, kind of your sales pitch in terms of like, why do you think it's important, whether it's you or mm-hmm. a different planner? Why do you think that is a necessity kind of for a couple's wedding day?
Right. So it's my role as a wedding planner is going to fall on somebody, regardless of if it's not me. So what I mean by that is somebody will end up filling that role, whether it be your aunt or your bridesmaid or your cousin or whomever, and they're going to hate your day. Like truly, they are going to be working so hard and being so frustrated that they're going to not even remember the wedding and be like, oh my gosh, that was such an annoying day. And just being fully honest about it. So having a wedding planner to help alleviate all those questions, not just on wedding day, but even when I'm developing timelines with my couples, they're like, oh my gosh, I never would have thought about that. Who's going to take home the gifts at the end of the night? Who's going to be giving a toast? Does your dress need to be bustled after the ceremony? Who's going to do that? All those logistical things that go into a wedding day that couples don't even realize happen. If your wedding runs smoothly, I have done my job well, and people won't even notice I'm there. If it did not go well, they will notice, right? So just making sure that burden is taken off the couple's shoulders is really important.
No, I mean, I really do think it is kind of like one of the most thankless jobs at a wedding I do. And I've talked with planners at wedding shows and everybody, because like you said, if you do your job, then it's not even thought of, right? It's just like, oh, everything went well, but they don't realize like you're kind of like behind the scenes, like kind of, putting out the fires or, helping them dodge, whatever.
We have literally put out a fire.
And so, it's just tough because like, people get married every day and they don't have a planner or they don't have a video or they don't have they have an iPod. And so it's tough, but it is like, I do think like a lot of that burden, like you said, falls on, it could fall on your photographer and then they could be the one having to coordinate or it could fall on the DJ. And it's not like your DJ's job to help kind of figure out how the reception should go.
Right. And in my school of thought, I feel like everyone should do their job and stay in their own lane and do it really, really well. Because if, like you said, if the photographer ends up being quote unquote the planner, they're missing out on some of those photos that you would have absolutely loved and been like, why didn't you get that photo? Well, I was busy bustling your dress, or whatever that's going to look like. So just really making sure that each vendor category is doing what they're there to do and doing it to the best of their ability. And my job is basically the ringleader, master of ceremonies, if you will, for making sure that that communication is happening between all of the vendors, like making sure the videographer is there and the photographer is there for, okay, we're going to be doing the cake cutting. Are you all set up? Nope. Okay, let's delay a little bit, just really kind of having the what's next in your mind and making sure that the entire vendor team is ready, that the couple knows what they're going to be doing, cueing the MC to make that announcement so your guests know what's happening. Also in communication with the back of the house with your catering team and making sure, okay, is dinner ready on time or do we need to delay the grand entrance? It's just the entirety of the day is what we're watching for. And a really good wedding planner will always watch for the what's next, because we always have to be about 5 steps ahead of what the day actually is and making sure that, okay, if somebody needs to go to a bathroom break, that we're not starting toast when they're not even in the room. So.
Yeah, I will say, and when you kind of had put our timeline together for our wedding, I remember like at the, the beginning of it, it was like, Rebecca to have like the details ready to photograph because Dorothy got ready at like her parents' house. And I was like, man, like I would forget like how many times I show up, we start at 1:00 and I spend the first half an hour just trying to figure out, okay, well, where's your hanger? Okay, where's the dress? Okay, where's that? And like, just like having like little things like that, like 5 minutes before everybody gets there, like that could save, half an hour's worth of time. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's exactly what I do when I arrive on site for a wedding day. The very first thing that I do, of course, is make sure the bride has eaten. And number 2 is if she has her dress on a plastic hanger or if it's still in the garment bag, we take that out. We display that, get it ready for the photographer. I also, at my 1 week out prior meeting with my couples, always ask them for a copy of their invitation suite. So that way the photographers can get detail shots of that. I make sure that the bride has all the rings with her. So we set those out. We set her shoes out. We also make sure the florist has delivered her bouquet. That's all the thing a lot of people don't realize is, the florist is just going to set up the venue. Well, remember, you typically have photos beforehand. So you do need all those bouquets and you need all those boutonnieres beforehand. So getting those delivered to the hotel very first thing in the morning as well.
Yeah, and making sure that like the boutonnieres get on. Right. Like there's been so many times that we've done, like we'll be halfway or we'll be like done with groomsmen photos and oh no, we forgot to put the boutonnieres on. Totally. And then, either you have to like redo everything or you just say like, well. And what a shame is that to spend, I don't know how much boutonnieres cost, but to think that you paid all this money for them and you didn't even have them in the photos.
Exactly.
Talk about, I think what helps set you apart and obviously what shown to Dorothy the most, and we were talking, is kind of that the pre-production up to the wedding day. We had you for day of, but that it's never day of. It's like 3 months out.
Thank you.
And you can talk about that too.
Yes.
But I want to talk about like timelines, making sure everybody's on the same page. I have a wedding on Friday. I still don't have a timeline for it. And that is stressful to me. Yeah. So talk about kind of and that could be for your day of or the full planning, but kind of that all that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm going to touch on the misnomer of day of coordinator. So if anyone out there is offering literal just day of coordinator, that is your first red flag that they are a brand new coordinator. There should never, ever, in my opinion, be a coordinator that literally just shows up on your wedding day. What is that saving you? They're going to have to answer 1,000 questions that they don't know the answer to. And so they're going to have to go to you anyway. So why have that person you're paying to, to be there that doesn't know the answers to anything, right? So in our, what we call final planning and day of coordination service is we actually get unlimited communications with our couples. We give out a customized vendor recommendation list, a customized planning timeline, and then over the span of however long we're working with the couple, our next in-person meeting starts up again about 3 months out prior to the wedding. And that's where we do a venue walkthrough. It could be a venue that we've been at 1,000 times. We do it every single time just to make sure the venue knows that you're working with us, to make sure that we know what your layout is going to look like, where that guest book table is going to be, where the dance floor is going to be. Are you having a band? Are you having a DJ? Where all that stuff is going to be laid out. So that way we know what we're walking into. You guys know what you're walking into. And then we do about at the 2 month out mark, a planning timeline meeting. So that's where that big timeline comes into play, where we walk through literally the entire details of your wedding day. Do you guys want a bouquet toss? Do you want a garter toss? Who's giving toast? Who's taking home gifts at the end of the night? Where are you getting ready? What's the transportation situation look like? Et cetera, et cetera. So we really get to know the details and ins and out of your wedding. And then at about the 1 week out mark is where I actually come to my couple's home and we finalize that timeline, finalize the vendor list, and then I collect all your personal decor from you. So what that means is I'm taking home everything besides what you're wearing. So it's going to be all of your escort cards, your champagne flutes, your cake knife server, your favors, all of that stuff.
Checks for the vendors.
Exactly.
Which is really nice.
Yep, exactly.
Tips for the vendors, which is really nice.
Right.
Because otherwise you're, chasing down someone or that's very nice to have.
Yeah. The absolute worst thing in my opinion is to have to come to you at the end of your wedding day and be like, oh, the DJ didn't get his check. Can I get that from you? It's like, I don't want my couples dealing with money at all on wedding days. So even though it might feel weird to give, especially if you're providing gratuities, if it feels weird to give it to me, as the planner to distribute prior to wedding day, I cannot tell you, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to designate that to somebody, getting it out of your mind and just being like, it's done. It's taken care of. Rebecca's got it.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the next meeting is your rehearsal, where I co-run your rehearsal with your selected officiant. And then myself and my assistant are on site from start to finish on your wedding day. So my company specifically does not do an hourly limit for wedding days. However, what that typically looks like is showing up about a half hour before hair and makeup is completed, setting up all those details that we just talked about, and then running all the way through the end of the day, where we help pack up all the personal decor that you gave us, as well as gifts and cards, and putting that into the designated person's car.
I do think the hourly thing I've had some, where it's then there's a gap, and then that's challenging because we arrive and we don't know where anything is, or where, because the invitation suite's in the car and they're on, break or whatever. So I think that having that is really nice, is kind of that, kind of start to finish kind of thing. And I also think making sure that, where you do the final timelines and kind of sending everything out. I've had, I was joking with someone else on the podcast. I had a wedding this summer and it was Joe's wedding and it was the day before, and I was looking through everything and I was like, oh, they have a planner, a good planner. And I never heard from them ever. I never heard from them ever. And I've had I not have looked back on those notes and kind of seen that in who do we contact or whatever, one of the questions, I was like, that's really interesting. Yeah. And so I just, appreciate, the vendors, the planners that reach out and kind of, obviously make sure that we're all kind of on that same page.
So even with final planning and day of coordination, the first contact that we make with your vendors is at that 2 month out mark. So after we have run through your timeline, I've sent off the rough draft to the couple for their review to make sure everything looks good. After I get their approval, that is when I start reaching out to your vendor team and saying, hey, I'm the day of planner for so-and-so and so-and-so. Here's the timeline that was just approved by them. Can you please take a look over and make sure you don't have any concerns? I've written a lot of timelines in my day, but still there's sometimes where a photographer that I've never worked with is like, oh, I would really prefer to have 20 more minutes for family photos or whatever that looks like. So just making sure that I'm playing as a team player and that the vendors have laid eyes on it so they have their buy-in too. So on wedding day, it's not this sprung surprise of like, oh, here's the timeline. Okay, everybody follow it. No, it really is that pre-communication before, which I think is one of the ways that sets our company apart as well.
So something I wanted to talk about and that I was very thought was a fantastic idea was earlier this year, this big wedding show that you helped kind of put on with some of the other planners in town, talking about your wedding day, right? And share that. So I want to talk more about that. And you said that it was, great success and that you guys are thinking about doing something else with that. So can you tell us a little bit about that and talk about that?
Absolutely. So I put on a wedding show that was called Beyond the Dress Collective. It has been a brainchild of mine for many, many years. One of the things that I feel like is really my heart is educating couples because, again, you've never done this before. You don't know what you don't know, right? So I really wanted to collaborate with some of the top wedding vendors in the Seattle area and really wanted it to be an educational piece. And so how I kind of formatted this show and how it actually came to fruition was I was having a meeting with Lily Young, who is a local bridal gown designer here in the Seattle area. And I was talking with her. I was like, man, if I were to ever do a wedding show, this is what it would be. And she goes, I will partner with you on that. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah. And she, to the point of in that meeting, pulled out her calendar and said, when can we do this? And I was like, crap, I actually have to do this. So
time to step up.
Yep, totally. So that completely forced me to start actually making this a reality. And so what it ended up being was a tea at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in Seattle, which of course is a very iconic hotel. And they provided tea service during our presentation. And then I partnered, like Reed said, with 3 other wedding planners, so Invisible Hostess, Perfectly Posh, and Clutch Events, in talking about our experiences in planning our own weddings, as well as the common pitfalls that we see our couples fall into. So it was really fun because I actually had all the girls bring their wedding gowns with them, including myself. And then I had our participating florist, John with Aria Style, do a recreation of all of our wedding bouquets. And we all brought our albums. So attendees actually got to see what our weddings look like, because that's probably one of the most common questions we get asked is like, oh my gosh, your wedding must have been amazing. I was like, well, no, actually it was really intimate and, really, really very small. And here's what it looked like. So they got to see our dresses. They got to see our photo albums. Enjoy high tea as well. And then we did our presentation on common pitfalls we see our couples fall into, mistakes that we made while planning our weddings as well. And then if there was a question about one of our attendees asked, I'm having a destination wedding. I don't know how to fly with my wedding gown. Well, because one of our speakers or one of our participants was Luli, she actually came up and was able to speak on how to travel with your wedding gown. And so it was really great to have that interaction with all of the vendors that were participating, actually be able to answer specific questions to them. But it was no holds bar. People could ask us anything. How do I go to the bathroom in my wedding dress? How, what's the best way to pick a wedding DJ or, MC? Just literally sky was the limit on anything they could ask. And then we ended up wrapping up the showcase with a debut of Lily's spring line fashion show. So it was a really great experience with high tea, fashion, and wedding education. So we're looking to go into our second year with that. And the feedback that we got from the attendees was amazing. They're like, where else in Seattle are you going to get 4 of the top wedding planners for $39 offering 3 hours worth of wedding advice? That is like unheard of. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, no, I thought it was fantastic when you announced it, and I kind of followed along just because I thought it was just a great idea. What was it like kind of going back and reliving your wedding day and kind of seeing, I mean, did it hold up, or were you like, oh, I would have done something different?
I definitely would have done a couple things differently. We actually were one of those couples that did not hire a professional DJ or MC. We relied on friends to play acoustic guitar for our ceremony and cocktail hour. And then we actually took off by a seaplane, and seaplanes can't leave after dusk. And so our evening was really, really short. So that's why we made that decision of, okay, well, we're not going to have this crazy dance party, so we really don't need, a DJ or MC. Looking back, I really wish we would have had one, because the guests, kind of were probably wondering of what's next, and why isn't there at least a little bit of dancing, because we had a little bit of time after our dinner to get some dancing in. So that was one regret of mine. Everything else, I loved that we brought in personal stuff. My husband and I met at Starbucks, and so we brought in coffee beans as the base of all of our vases, and that's what we put our escort cards in. He's from Alaska, so we had Alaskan amber beer. I am not a heavy drinker. My drink of choice is actually root beer. So we had some of my favorite root beers on site. So we did bring in personal elements that still definitely stand up. There was some things that I was like, oh, the venue chose the color. I had given them my color palette, but I didn't actually see the products that they were actually going to put out on wedding day. And I really wish I would have, because the colors that I gave them were not at all what they actually ended up using. I was like, oh, that's a really ugly green. That's not the color I gave you. And that's a really ugly, copper color. That's not the color I gave you. So anyway, just a few things, but looking back, of course, sometimes the mistakes are the best memories of your wedding day, but it was still a good day regardless.
Not to ruin the whole talk and spoil it, but what are a couple common kind of mistakes or pitfalls that you see clients make?
Yeah. So one of the biggest, I think, is just not trusting your vendors. I see this time and time again of couples wanting to think outside the box, which is in general a really good thing. But if logistically it does not make sense, trust us. We're going to give you that suggestion of, no, you should not have one food truck for 500 guests. It's not going to work, So just really, we're going to give you our opinion and our best advice, and know that we truly have your best interest at heart. So trust us. Number 2 is trying to pack too much into the day, I think, is a really common mistake. The day goes by so fast as it is. Let it happen organically, and, enjoy a longer meal, enjoy a longer dance party. Don't try and program in, okay, now we're going to do this photo right here, and now we're going to do this game, and now we're going to do, we're going to have 10 toasters. Really just enjoy the day and let it be a celebration of you and your family and friends, and not try and pack the day with so much programming, because you're going to be exhausted by the end of it. Especially ladies, I'm sorry, hair and makeup starts so much earlier than the guys have to get ready. And by the end, you're just wiped. And so just I think the less programming and the less just so scheduled of a day, the better, personally.
I just was laughing at our wedding 2 weeks ago. She was getting the hair and makeup, and he was in the golf simulator,
Yep.
just
totally
hanging out. And you're like, wow, this is not one of these things.
Yeah.
Is not like the other. And it's,
right.
So talk about what do you do when you're not doing a million weddings and planning a wedding show and educating brides and grooms? What do you do? What's Rebecca do on her off time?
It doesn't leave much off time, but my husband and I live up in Snohomish. We're kind of on a little mini farm up there. We've got 11 chickens and 3 beehives and 2 dogs and 2 cats. I ride horses, so I'm a huge animal lover. We spend a lot of time with our animals. They are our kids, and so a lot of time at the dog parks, a lot of time out in the backyard. I love to garden. Like I said, we're on a couple acres out there, so just putting in new flowers and cleaning up flower beds. And of course, the majority of the flowers bloom in the summer when I am crazy, so don't get to spend a lot of time out there, but typically that's what I'm out doing, is just growing new flowers and weeding, a lot of weeding, and spending time with the animals and riding horses. And that's that's the life.
I do think I remember following along on Instagram. You're something digging out the flower bed out front or something. I remember that it was like quite the process.
It was quite the undertaking.
What's with the bees and what do you do? Do you just
Yeah, so it was mainly an interest of my husband, and I've kind of been along for the ride, and it's fascinating. I cannot tell you, like, it is so cool to learn what bees do on a daily basis. But we bought 2 starter hives. So basically what that means is a queen pod and then a few bees, as in a few, I say 50,000. So a few bees to start that hive, and then they kind of take off and go. This year, we were actually lucky enough to find a wild swarm, which is kind of cool. So my husband had a few extra boxes built and ready to go. And one of our neighbors texted us and said, "Did you lose your bees?" And we went out and checked our hives, and they were still thriving and doing just fine. And so I said, "No, our bees are fine, but we're going to come down and get them." So we came down and knocked them out of the tree and dumped them in the new hive. And so now we have 3 hives. We do harvest honey. So we do sell it annually. And so we've had quite a few. I actually almost oversold last year. We didn't keep track of how much was going out. And I was like, oh, shoot. So we had to open up some jars that we had stored for ourselves and dump it into larger jars and be able to fulfill all those orders. But it was just put out on Facebook with our family and friends and fellow wedding vendors and people saying, yeah, I'll take some. And we also harvest raw comb as well. So yeah, it's been a really fun experience and a big learning experience for sure.
Talk about, living up in Snohomish, and I know you work everywhere, but like, what do you think of kind of the explosion of kind of the Snohomish wedding community and all the venues and stuff up there?
It's huge. I actually don't do a lot of weddings up in the Snohomish area. But a stone's throw away from where I live with, just half a dozen venues that are out there. That's actually my next step. Is my husband and I are actually currently actively looking for properties to be able to turn into a wedding venue. I've been doing planning for 15 years. And so trying to think about my next step and my succession plan. Also why I specifically did not name the company after myself was to be able to sell it eventually. And with my associate planners, I'm hoping that I can hand the company off to them. Still probably going to be doing planning for the next 5 to 10 years. I'm not in a hurry to be done with planning, but as I start to age, I'm also looking at, okay, what is the next step? And so venue ownership has always really, really interested me. And I feel like there is a gap between the rusticness of the Snohomish wedding venues and kind of the ballrooms. I really want to fulfill that middle gap of really being able to have a beautiful, my personal style is very craftsman style. So just a really beautiful kind of farmhouse feel, but really upscale. So that's currently what we're looking at right now. And the explosion of the Snohomish area is just crazy because I have looked into the process of opening up a venue. There's a lot of rules that the County of Snohomish has put into place because so many homes have been turned into wedding venues. They actually have put a block on it. And so you have to be really, really careful if you think, oh, I have a beautiful home, I'm going to turn it into a wedding venue. There's a lot of rules that come along with that. So just making sure that we're finding the right fit for us and making sure, of course, that the venues that are opening up in Snohomish are also following the rules.
So to kind of round out the conversation here as we approach the end, talk to me about kind of who is the ideal New Creations client? Who do you kind of vibe with, or who do you find you attract most kind of through your word of mouth and networking?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically my ideal average client is anywhere between the age of 28 to 35. Like I said, I do specialize in Asian weddings. So that tends to be who I attract most, is either full Asian or mixed. And it's the couples that really will let me run with my creativity. I think that's true for practically any wedding vendor, especially in the visual side of things, such as your florist. But it's really fun when couples let you take them and turn that into a wedding day. So I think trust is really, really important. Again, as I mentioned a few times, we have your back. And so having that trust with your wedding planner is really important. And being able to know that we're going to walk you through the entire process. So some of the times, the red flags I see with some couples that I'm even interviewing is they try and put the cart before the horse. And it's like, we're not even there yet. You don't have a date. You don't have a venue. Let's not even be thinking about that right now. So again, just knowing that I will walk you through the entire process. My ideal couple also are animal lovers, because as much as I try and lint roll myself, there's always a stray hair from one of my golden retrievers on me. So just having them understand that, yep, animals are a part of my life. And, certainly, obviously, I'm not a scrap, but just making sure that they, I think animal lovers also attract fellow animal lovers. We all tend to have, a really outgoing personality and have that warmth. But we, my company, main words are fun, genuine, and authentic. And I really feel like that's the couples that we tend to attract, are people that know we are not perfect. But we will absolutely do 100% our best and make sure that you're in really good hands. And I'm very, very, very lucky to still have couples from weddings many years ago that I am still friends with to this day. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've been so successful.
Awesome. I will say, I told Dorothy last night that you were coming today, and even though we have people come quite a bit, she goes, "Oh, you need to make sure everything's clean."
Oh, no.
Because Rebecca's coming, because she does still love and enjoy you, and it was so fun working with you. And I will say, candidly, having worked with you earlier in my career, continuing on and working with other planners, like, it is not lost on me things that we didn't have to worry about that day, or the way things were handled. Then, like I said, where I work now with other planners or not planners, or, day ofs or whatever, and like kind of seeing how we had it, and then, having to kind of look at other stuff, how it is now. We're very appreciative of the work that you did. So thank you so much for coming in. If people want to learn more about you, your company, planning, what would you have them do and check out?
Absolutely. So our website is the best way to find out all of our information about us. So that's newcreationsweddings.com. Also, we do keep a pretty active Instagram page as well. So if you want to follow us on social media, it's at New Creations Wed.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thanks so much.
Thank you.